And I'm delighted to say that one of the team are joining me tonight, and that's Jared Kite, who's our guiding light. He's the visionary who procures and delivers guides and experiences around the world that so delight you, our clients. Now, the main focus of this webinar is we're going to try and update you on the world of travel, and we're going to try and talk to you a little bit towards the end about how we think travel might evolve going forward. Jared and I will talk through a number of slides for some sort of 20 minutes, and at the end we'll have time for questions. Now, many of you kindly send questions in already. Hopefully some of our slides will answer those questions, but we'll also deal with some of them at the end. But if during the presentation you have any questions at all, please just message us via chat and we'll try and answer those questions. So without further ado, what is happening in the world of travel? Well, I think it's self-evident to say that we're facing an unprecedented crisis. I know that, you know that, we all know that. But perhaps what you don't know, and what has really impressed me, is how the world of travel has come together. For me, travel is about people, it's about relationships, it's about trust. And I've been delighted to see whether it's been working with our suppliers on the ground, with small lodges, hoteliers, with guides, and even competitors, they've all come together. It's collaboration. I'd love it if our government was doing that with the travel industry. Unfortunately, that's not the case. I'd love it too if the governments around the world were collaborating and working together to deal with this pandemic. So what's happening in the world of steps? Well, our focus is threefold. You, our clients, our team, looking after our team, and in doing so, looking after the company itself. So we at Steps, like many within the travel industry, have availed ourselves of the furlough scheme, and we furloughed the majority of our team. We've left behind, and it's very important that we do this, a skeleton team, which we are rotating, so that they're there to answer your questions, whether it be about travel you have later this year or next year, or indeed travel that you might want to think about. We had a number of inquiries today for the Galapagos, for Costa Rica. Last week, we took a booking for somebody who wants to go to Iceland later this month. In spite of the fact we haven't physically been in the office, we've remained connected, very much in contact with each other. Each team has a weekly Zoom call with a catch-up, and every Friday afternoon at 4:30, we have a company-wide Zoom call where I try and give presentations, we're sharing information. We also have done a number of quizzes by Zoom, and as per this slide, it was organized by Rob and Nadia, a cycle challenge to raise money for NHS and care workers. In short, I think that we are in a good place. We're here to ride through this crisis. We might well emerge from it somewhat differently, but we are in a good place. But for now, I'm going to hand over to Jared, and he will talk to you about where we are now, namely what's happening sort of pre-trip in terms of booking conditions, etc., what's happening on the ground in different countries, and finally sort of which countries are already open and which countries are beginning to open up. So Jared, over to you.
Thank you very much, Justin, and good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Quite an introduction from my boss there. I hope I can live up to it. So it's interesting times for us all right now. And if you're anything like me, then you've got a really big appetite to travel. And we've really been talking to our clients, to you, to find out exactly what it is you're thinking about and whether you do share our appetite for traveling right now. And we put a survey out to our database. That was probably about 6 weeks ago now. And what is without doubt is that there is a huge appetite for travel out there. There was something like 75% of you said you wanted to travel before spring 2021. And what we were enthused by is that 80% of you said that you wanted to start planning your trips right now. You wanted to get on with planning, so you had something to look forward to. So that gave us a lot of confidence and a lot of enthusiasm to try and help you do that. And we then asked you, well, what can we do to really take that enthusiasm you've got and turn it into you feeling confident to actually travel, to book a holiday and to go ahead and travel. One of the key things that came out of that was the need for flexible booking conditions. So understandably, nobody wanted to put monies down on a holiday when there was so much uncertainty, not just with COVID-19, but with the world of travel in general, I suppose, with what is happening with the government still, unfortunately, dragging their heels on things. We were hoping that we would be able to share some good news with you tonight with regards to air bridges and what have you. But still, it would seem there is no clarity on that. There is still an uncertainty there. So we were very keen to look at what we can do to give you a little bit of confidence with booking. And so we've come up with a very sort of bespoke, individual approach, if you like, to your booking conditions. When you come to us and you give us a travel brief, we tailor make that holiday just for you. And that's exactly what we're going to do with the booking conditions that we offer you. So we're going to talk to our suppliers on the ground. We're going to ensure that we can get you the best booking conditions that are available, and we're going to pass them on to you. And that might be deposits whereby you have a cooling off period, deposits that are transferable, deferrable holiday dates, final payment dates that are pushed back, so are much later than normal, and cancellation fees that are kept to an absolute minimum, just to hopefully give you that extra peace of mind that you need to commit to your holiday. So one of the other things that we've been talking to you about, and we've been talking to lots of people in the industry about, is travel insurance. And unfortunately, I think a lot of clients have had quite sort of unsavory sort of experiences of trying to make claims through travel insurance in the last few months. And a lot of sort of headlines sort of suggesting that there won't be any travel insurance to give you cover for COVID-19 in the future. Well, I can hopefully disavow you of that notion, because we've been talking to our sort of preferred broker, a company called Campbell Irvine, and they assure us that they are working with providers to come up with a policy that does give protection for COVID-19, and that's prior to travel and also whilst you're in country, should you need to be repatriated. We haven't yet seen that policy, and of course the devil will be in the detail. But we're confident, knowing that Campbell Irvine is such a good broker, that it'll be an excellent policy, and it'll serve to give you all much greater peace of mind when you're traveling. Something else that has come out that I think is misinformation is that, if the Foreign Office are advising against travel, then your insurance is immediately invalidated. Now, yes, that might be the case with some policies, but with the better policies, that isn't the case. You just need to talk to your policy provider, explain to them what you're looking to do, and they will tell you what cover you still have in place. And the general rule is, if you're making a claim which is linked to the reason why the government is advising against travel, then no, you won't be covered. But if you're making a regular claim because your baggage has gone missing, or perhaps you had an accident totally not related to COVID-19, then your policy will still be valid for those sorts of claims. So, do talk to us. We can give you lots of advice about this kind of thing, we can make sure that we get behind some of the headlines that quite often are just false, are just incorrect. I think one of the key things as well to hopefully give you peace of mind is the STEPS team. Justin has referred to the team already. And to remind you that, we are here for you 24/7. When you go away on your holiday, not only are our partners on the ground there for you, but we're just a phone call away at any time of the day, 24 hours a day. Sadly, we've become quite good at dealing with crises. The last 2.5 months, we've learned a lot in how to deal with this kind of thing. And so, yeah, we're always here for you. We're keen to offer our support. So the other thing that came up, flexible payment terms, travel insurance, the other key thing was, what are you going to do to keep us safe on the ground? And Justin referred to it, the collaborative nature of the travel industry. And both he and I have been incredibly impressed with the way our partners on the ground have reacted right across the world to try and introduce new, what we would call standard operational procedures, I suppose, but measures in place really to mitigate the risk of not only you potentially catching COVID-19 in country, but also to prevent you possibly passing it on to people locally as well. And I know some of you have told us that that is a concern for you. So these measures have been rolled out. There are the WTT, the World Tourism Council, has set up a framework which everybody is trying to use, so there is some sort of consistency there. And the measures are in place right the way from when you leave your door. You're at the airport, on the flight, when you arrive in country, your transportation, the accommodation you're going to be in, whether it be a hotel or possibly a small ship, the contact you have with our team on the ground, how that is managed, the experiences and the excursions that you enjoy, and just the way that the sites of interest are managed. Some of the museums are now been set up similar to how you might go shopping in a supermarket, with that sort of 1 meter or 2 meter distance kept between everybody in the museum. So, no detail has been spared here really. And I think it's a case of necessity being the mother of invention. And also a lot of our suppliers having some time on their hands to really put their efforts into making this work. And that's exactly what they do. So on a safari, for example, you'll have your private vehicle. And I've included this shot in here because that does mean you'll have your 12-year-old annoying son trying to photobomb you, sticking his tongue out behind you on the back seat. That happens no matter whether you've got COVID or not. But lots of work happening behind the scenes to ensure that you are able to travel safely. So at hotels and on small ships, there's a particular focus. And again, I've been very impressed with the level of detail we've been provided with, and exactly the measures that are being taken. And what I think is important is that we don't bombard you with all of this information. And some of it, let's be honest, is a little bit dry. It's quite clinical. One journalist we spoke to the other day was talking about putting the hospital into hospitality. I'm pleased to say that there is a lot of effort being made to ensure that the experience that you have on the ground will not be completely sanitized. There is a balance here that we're all trying to find. But these are some of the things that you will find happening in hotels and in small ships. And I was talking to somebody this morning actually about a measure they're taking whereby their staff are on a 2-week rolling basis. So that means they have 2 weeks sort of isolation before they come into work, just to ensure that their staff aren't bringing in coronavirus into their properties, which seem to make very good sense to me. So a lot of effort, as I say, has been made to ensure that your experience on the ground is not compromised, it is not over sanitized. And I know some of you have concerns about us and possibly us passing on COVID-19 to certain communities. Well, firstly, I'm just sharing with you some of the information we've been sent by our partners here. And I love that first paragraph there. Okay, we might not be able to give you a hug, we might not be able to shake your hand, but we still love you and we still want you to come and visit us. And the greeting and the hospitality you receive will be as warm and as genuine and as wholehearted as it ever was. In fact, you know what? I think it'll be even bigger, the greeting you get and the welcome you receive. Because let's not forget, tourism provides income to about 10% of the world population. For many people, it is their lifeline. They depend on tourism for their livelihood. And there's been some research done recently in Africa whereby a person in Africa working in tourism is likely to have on average about 10 dependents. So that income is not only important to that individual, it's important to that whole community. So that makes me believe, you will be greeted metaphorically with open arms. And important that that our suppliers and Steps Travel is giving as much consideration to not only your safety, but also the safety of the people that we work with on the ground. And this is just one example of what a camp is doing. This is a great company we work with in Tanzania called Nomad. and that they're giving their staff PPE when they're doing the laundry, clearing out dustbins and those sorts of jobs that have to be done. But they're making sure their staff are being well looked after in that respect. And the bottom one there is just something from Oberoi, which I quite liked. You know, a lot of these measures are very much being sort of implemented on a blanket sort of level. But, you know, again, we're working very much in a tailor-made industry. And so Oberoi are trying to help people that might feel a little bit more vulnerable and are doing sort of reserved dining hours for senior citizens between 6:30 and 8 p.m. at their hotels. So again, just an indication that, yes, it's being done on a blanket level, but also there is a lot of consideration about individual needs when you're in country. So where is opening up? And you know, this is going to be a slow process. I think we have to accept that. And you know, it isn't going to be a binary sort of process. It's not going to be a case of just flicking a switch. You know, 1 minute we're not able to travel, the next minute we can. It'll be staggered. It'll be, you know, some countries will start to open up. They'll dip their toe in the water by opening up to domestic tourism. That will then sort of be a regional bubble. And that bubble will then gradually grow, and ultimately one hopes will encompass, you know, the whole of the world. International travel will be back on track, and certainly a step down that sort of that road to recovery we're waiting for is the air bridges, the reciprocal agreements that we're waiting for our government to announce. We put together a web page. Nadia and her team have got this live today. And that gives you a country by country sort of indication of what is happening in terms of tourism in those places. So I think Nadia will be sending you an email from us all to thank you for joining us this evening. And in that email, there will be a link to that page. So a really handy resource for you just to check on the places that you might have in mind to see where they're at with tourism right now. And of course, a very fluid situation. It might be correct right now. Tomorrow that might be updated, but we'll be keeping a close eye on that. So sort of in reverse order, I suppose, really, let's look at the Americas. I took this photo in Northwest Argentina about 4 or 5 years ago. It's in the Salta region, absolutely beautiful region. I think a place that would really appeal right now. I know a lot of us are really seeking remote, wild sort of places. Northwest Argentina is one of the most remotest wild places I think I've had the fortune to visit. But as far as the Americas is concerned, you know, they are a couple of months behind us, and as such are, you might say, sort of in the eye of the storm, and quite a lot of negative press coming out from the Americas at the moment. But it isn't all bad news. Ecuador, for example, has opened its borders. You are able to get into Ecuador at the moment. You would have to isolate, but again, that will change. And I think Uruguay was also listed. The EU came out with a list of safe countries as far as they were concerned. And Uruguay was on that list, one of the only Latin American countries to be as such. But I think what's important here is that we have to be confident that the Americas will come through this. And what we're urging everybody to consider is to start planning their holidays. Come to us, tell us what you've got in mind, and let us try and help you put some of those plans into action. These plans don't need to be set in concrete. You know, they can be easily adapted, and we will be extremely flexible in helping you do that. Costa Rica is another area that we were hoping actually was going to open up today, the 1st of July, but they've just pushed back. Just possibly a few weeks, maybe to the end of the month before they open up, just so they can get all of those measures that we were talking about properly in place. Asia, so Sri Lanka, these are the stilt fishermen in Sri Lanka that some of you may well have had a good fortune to see. Sri Lanka will be opening up, and we were hoping for the 1st of August, that's what we were told. But again, they've revised that. They're now saying it's more likely to be the 15th of August for their tourism season to start. Bhutan, we're confident that Bhutan will open sort of around about October time, at the beginning of the festival season. Bhutan has only at the moment sort of had 15 active cases of COVID-19. And so, yeah, we certainly expect Bhutan to open. Elsewhere through Asia, again, there are lots of signs of domestic tourism starting up, domestic flights happening, sites of interest opening to domestic tourists. Cambodia has been very innovative, really, and said, right, you can come into Cambodia as an international tourist, but they're taking a deposit of $3,000 from you. And that will pay for any treatment, any hospitalization you might need should you catch COVID-19. It will also pay for a test that you have on arrival. And whatever left from that $3,000 will be refunded to you when you leave. So that's an interesting sort of take on things. The opposite of that is Uzbekistan, who are saying, if you come to Uzbekistan and catch COVID-19, we'll give you $3,000 for your troubles, which is a different way of doing things. But yeah, you can't blame these countries for trying to kickstart their tourism industries. So in Africa, what is happening? And I know a lot of you have indicated that you're perhaps like me, desperate to get back out to Africa, desperate for a fix of wildlife. You want to see the plains. And at this time of the year, we're just about to start heading into migration sort of season. Tanzania has really taken the lead. They are open for tourism. And I watched a couple of little films that a partner on the ground had made today, actually. She was in Namiri, which is an Asilia camp in the Serengeti. Yeah, managed to travel from the UK all the way through pretty seamlessly, to be honest. And you know, was kind of asking what is all the fuss about, which was really great to hear. So Tanzania has opened up, and we're expecting Namibia also to open its borders on the 18th of September. Mountain gorillas, a lot of you I know have showed concerns about whether we may be able to pass on COVID-19 to chimps and mountain gorillas. Well, Rwanda has opened its borders, but they're only allowing people in if you're coming in via a private charter. So Rwanda have very much gone down the route of that sort of low impact, low volume, high value sort of model. And at the moment they're accepting tourists provided you come in on a private charter. And they're also changing the guidelines for visiting mountain gorillas. You now need to maintain a 10-meter distance between you and the mountain gorillas. But I think hopefully that's a step towards opening up tourism on a much larger scale. I mentioned Namibia and South Africa. South Africa, let's be honest, they really did mess up with a bit of bad PR and communication by announcing that they wouldn't accept any international tourists until next year. There was a huge U-turn and a lot of backtracking, and we're now expecting them to be opening up to international visitors sometime in September. But Namibia have come out and said that they will definitely be opening their borders on the 18th of September to international tourists. And similar to that image of Northwest Argentina, if it's wide open spaces that you're looking for, and I'm sure plenty of us are, then you know, Namibia really delivers on that front. So Europe, if you do have a yearning to see wildlife, and perhaps you're not yet feeling confident enough to travel to Africa, there is some amazing wildlife on our doorsteps. And we're really, really excited to announce a partnership that we've been working on for some time now with the European Nature Trust. They've appointed us their sort of designated tourist partner. And the European Nature Trust is headed up by a real dynamic character by the name of Paul Lister, who has invested a lot of his money into keeping parts of Europe wild. And so they have some fabulous projects where tourism is a key part of their sort of conservation sort of initiatives, mainly in Italy and in Spain and in Scotland and Romania. And so in Italy, for example, in the Apennine Mountains, traveling in spring, that's what will greet you there. That right-hand top photograph, the wildflowers in spring in the Apennines are beautiful. But you can see bears, you can see wolves, little owls, some fabulous wildlife with that wonderful Italian hospitality, the wonderful food, the wine, and some brilliant guiding. So the European Nature Trust supports local conservation projects. And through our links with the European Nature Trust, we can get those guides to join you in the field, to give you really insightful interpretation of what you're seeing and the animals that you're encountering. So yeah, don't just think Africa for wildlife. There's plenty on your doorstep. In Spain, Cantabria for wild bears is fabulous. Down in Andalusia, we're working with a lynx project where they're getting some amazing sightings of lynx. So do talk to us about that if that appeals. And elsewhere in Europe, yeah, plenty of options opening up. Our chairman is en route to Croatia at the moment, and Croatia is certainly one area that certainly is appealing to our clients. Iceland is the other area that really seems to be appealing to our clients at the moment. And good on Iceland, they really got on the front foot and came up with a system to test people on arrival. So you'll be tested, you'll be asked to download an app. You go into Reykjavik, you wait 6 hours, you get your results, assuming you're negative, of course, away you go. And you pay, I think it's about 95 pounds for the test. And that's certainly appealed to a lot of our clients. And you know, looking at those images, why wouldn't it? Some fabulous properties in Iceland. We'd suggest you just plonk yourself at one of those properties, use that as your base, self-drive, maybe do a bit of guided excursions as well, all the way around Iceland, with some surreal landscapes and beautiful wild open landscapes all over the island. So I think that is me done. So I'm going to hand over now to Justin, just to sort of wrap things up. Over to you, Justin.
Jared, thank you very much. Very thorough as ever, and hopefully I answered a question from Carol Hindle, who was interested in Europe and indeed photographic opportunities. Just to answer another question from Will Hyde, where did Jared get his tan from? I would say that he worships false god. He does use tanning lotions. So,
thank you, Will.
But more seriously, it's perhaps not where do we go, but where should we go? I think the speed at which countries will open up is dependent on how they've handled the COVID crisis and also the percentage of their GDP that comes from tourism. Travel is hugely important to some countries, to their economies. Travel helps fund the world. It helps make the world go round. And there are a few other industries that literally reach out and give another country money, and more specifically, put money into the pockets of people on the ground. Added to that, I think that travel funds communities and conservation. And there are many projects with CSR at their heart that have suffered in recent months, whether they be safari camps in Africa, eco lodges in Latin America, again, safari lodges in India, some of the tiger parks, and in Asia. Conservancies, national parks have been closed with no revenue. So that affects projects, communities, rangers and their salaries, and wildlife has been under threat. And I think it was Paul who asked the question, has there been any increase in the poaching during the pandemic? The answer is sadly yes. The New York Times, The Independent, The Guardian have all reported as such. Map Ives, who's the founder of Rhino Conservation Botswana, has called it an absolute crisis, a bloody calamity. Those are his words, not mine. Panthera have seen a rise in the killing of jaguars, ocelots and pumas in Colombia due to poaching. In Cambodia in April, there were 3 critically endangered giant ibis were killed for their meat. In India, there's been reports of an upsurge in tiger poaching. And in Uganda, Rafiki is the silverback of the Nukuringa group, a group of mountain gorillas in the southwest of Uganda that I had the privilege of first going to before they opened up to tourism. We were one of the few companies that worked with the Uganda Wildlife Authority to habituate these gorillas. And last month, Rafiki, the silverback, was killed. So I believe it's our responsibility to help protect these places. Some of you, Roy Abrams, I know, will need little persuasion. Others are perhaps less certain. I know that, as Jared mentioned, that some of you have questioned whether we should be promoting travel to remote destinations or countries less able to cope with COVID. I think we're lucky to have this choice. Many around the world are not so lucky. For them, the risk of COVID is far outweighed by more pressing issues. These are not my words, but what we've been told by the guides, the rangers, and the conservationists that we work with around the world. So moving on to my final slide, what do we think is going to happen to travel sort of post-COVID, or maybe as a result of COVID? As I said at the outset, travel is about people. And yes, crises accelerate trends, and one of them will be technology and the way that we use technology, whether it be in the booking process of travel or once we're abroad. But it's still about people. We need that personal touch. We need to speak to people. We don't want to rely totally on algorithms. We want that empathy, that understanding, and our questions answered. There's been much talk of build back better. And I sincerely hope that this is the case, and it will be, certainly with steps we're looking at changing a lot of what we do and how we do it. We can't ignore the big elephant in the room, which is sort of the carbon emissions of flights. And at Steps, we do our best to balance both your and our own flights. As I said earlier on, I don't think that not to travel is the answer. Rather, that when we do travel, we have to ensure that we have a positive impact. We need to look at supply chains. I think provenance will be key. How hotels, lodges, ground agents look after their staff and their team. As I said, travel's a people industry. We need to travel lightly, and as per some of those points that we travel to protect. It's in our nature to conserve. And I think that one of the key things is that we will fly less, but we will travel slower and we will stay longer. And I think that will allow us to escape the ordinary, discover the extraordinary, and find deeper connections in some of the places that we're fortunate enough to travel to. So I think it's now time for some questions. I've got some that are sent through, and then I'll try and answer some that are coming through. Sally Tozer asked about groups, Jared, so would you like to say anything more about our fixed departures? I know that we work with very small groups and certainly smaller than some of our competitors, but what we're doing in terms of group travel and when you think that some of our first groups might head off.
Yes, so we have postponed pretty much all of our groups now for this year. Not quite all, but mostly. And we're talking to our suppliers on the ground as to what measures we can take to ensure that we're doing all we can to minimize the risk of COVID-19. And it's things like using bigger transport so we can maintain 1 meter or 2 meters physical distance, using bigger restaurants, possibly having 2 sittings at meals, all of these sorts of practical solutions that we've got at our disposal that we can use. I do think, however, and this isn't just for group travel, but perhaps more important, this is down to personal choice at the end of the day, but I do think if we are going to travel overseas, we have a responsibility to have a test for COVID-19. So we can be sure that we have a negative test and that we are not endangering spreading the disease to our hosts who are good enough to welcome us.
That was going to be one of my further questions, but about what we can do. What about, and so you've already answered that, let me ask it slightly differently. What about wearing of masks? What are some countries saying about masks? What are our views on the wearing of masks?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of perhaps skepticism out there as to whether a mask actually does what it sets out to achieve, whether it really is effective at stopping either catching or spreading COVID-19. But we know for a fact that there are some cultures, certainly in Asia, where wearing a mask is really just considered common courtesy. And sort of going back to some of the concerns that people understandably have about whether they will be welcome, I certainly feel that wearing a mask shows somebody that you are trying to do what you can to mitigate the risk of yourself spreading COVID-19 to other people around you. Certainly, I think it'll be an absolute necessity. I think the airlines will insist upon it. So I think you will have to wear your mask when you fly, for most airlines, I think at least. And so, yeah, I think most countries, it will be good to have a mask with you. Interestingly, I was speaking to a hotelier from Costa Rica, and they opened up for domestic tourism recently. And they're all sat around, all with their masks on, speaking, wanting to have a drink. And they all did a straw poll. They all said, look, do you all want us to wear these masks? And they all said, no, let's just take these masks off. Let's have a drink properly and let's have a conversation without that impediment there. And I think that's how a lot of people feel. I know in our survey, what people said was far more important was the measures, the enhanced hygiene regimes and those sorts of things that hotels were putting in place, as opposed to people waiting, people serving them wearing masks and gloves. Our clients certainly said in our survey that they felt that was less important.
Thank you. Another question that's coming from Jane Baxter. She was saying that we talked about small ships in your earlier slide. Are there any of these that will be accepting passengers this year? Do you know? I think the short answer is yes, but if you want to give a couple of examples.
Yes, absolutely. Well, one great example is a company we work with who are offering a small ship cruise to Alaska. Problem is getting to Alaska at the moment. Obviously, we can't go through the States, but their season starts in August. So we're talking prime whale watching, prime bear viewing season. And that is a small ship. And you know, the cruise industry has had an enormous amount of bad press, not only from the point of view of over tourism, not only from the point of view of environmental damage, carbon footprint, but also those horrendous stories that came out about people stuck on these huge, great floating ships with COVID-19 sort of running right through the whole ship. A small ship is a totally different proposition, and I know for a fact just how much investment is being made in ensuring that that environment is kept COVID free. And again, it'll rely on good testing, people going on and off the ship. But there is a huge amount being done to ensure that there is a very, very small risk of COVID-19 on small ships. So I think, yes, there are some cruises that are available. So certainly for August, as I said, with Alaska. Some of our partners in the high Arctic, they are certainly planning to run their voyages in northern Norway, where you can see in November time, you can see great congregations of orcas, of killer whales. And interestingly, Hurtigruten are running some ships right now in the Norwegian fjords. They're doing it for the domestic market, and reporting that there is a huge, massive interest in doing that, and they're running those cruises without any problems at all.
Yeah, and I think that you talked about Ecuador earlier on. I think of the Galapagos, again, small ships there, and we were talking earlier this afternoon about Egypt as well. So there's sort of small Nile cruises, etc.
Yeah, Egypt opened up today. Their borders are now open.
Just to move on to more, some people are asking questions about destinations, and Peter Lambry's asked about. He's watched the Art of Persia, the great documentary on the BBC. I'd certainly recommend watching it on iPlayer. He's asking whether we're looking at it for 21-22. I think the short answer is yes. Kirsten Young's asking about Australia, saying that they're still closed but interested in our take on it. I think it's fair to say that whilst Australia and certainly New Zealand have dealt with COVID excellently well, that the percentage of their GDP they get from tourism, I think in New Zealand it's about 12%, in Australia about 9%. So it's not as high, so it's not quite so important for them to open up. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I would agree. I would agree, and I think some of the panelists are talking about what Hurtigruten are doing there as well. Some of the people who are listening rather are talking about Hurtigruten and some of the stuff that they're doing.
Yeah, other destinations that people have asked about. There've been quite a few about Africa. You told us about Tanzania, Rwanda. There's a question about Madagascar.
Yeah, I mean, Madagascar has a very sort of unstable, you might say, infrastructure at the best of times. Some of the things that they've come out with, saying about the measures they're taking to prevent COVID-19 have raised a few eyebrows. They're not open for tourism at the moment, and personally, I would leave Madagascar until next year. That would be my advice with Madagascar. I think if you're looking to go to Africa for a wildlife experience, there are other countries that I think are far better geared up towards accepting you at the moment and implementing some of the measures that we've spoken about. That's not to write Madagascar off at all, because I think it is a wonderful destination. But I do think it needs a bit of time just to try and implement some of these measures that we've spoken about to protect not only their own people, but of course the visitors to the country as well.
Just staying with Africa, I think somebody's asked about Ethiopia. Ethiopia is very much open for business at the moment, if I'm correct.
It is, but with lots of caveats. I think really, if somebody is really looking to get to Africa at the moment, what I saw today from this person who was in the Serengeti really filled me with enthusiasm and gave me quite a lift, actually. And she was saying, I'm here in the Serengeti. There is nobody else here. This is high season in the Serengeti. You've got the wildebeest will be converging very shortly up in the northern part of the Serengeti, about to make that trip into Kenya for that annual migration. You've got that opportunity to get out there without the crowds to see that wonderful phenomenon. That really started making me look at what holiday I've got left, and I might need to have a word with you, Justin, after this webinar.
There's a few questions about the Middle East. I sort of read, was it today or yesterday, that Dubai is opening up as of the 7th of July. But there's a specific question here about Jordan. Have we got any updates on Jordan? I would have thought, well, the summer is pretty much too hot to go. So hopefully later in the year, October, November time, things would have eased there, and there might be some opening up.
Yeah, and I think you make a really valid point there, Justin, as well, that a lot of countries at the moment are completely out of season. So while they're saying we're not opened up for tourism yet, well, very few tourists will be going there anyway at this time. I'm thinking of India, and Jordan is a very good example there too. So whilst Jordan at the moment, we're not open for tourism, I know for a fact that there's a huge amount of work being done behind the scenes in Jordan to make sure that they are ready for tourism come the season, which in Jordan it normally sort of opens up in sort of September time, September, October.
Back to answer a question about Iran. Lara's just updated me, sorry, I should have known, that the Iran tour with Karen and Perry has been moved to May 22. It's on our website. Karen's asking about South Africa and planning a trip to there for Christmas. The short answer would be I would certainly start planning with it. As Jared said, we and all our suppliers are very flexible about terms and conditions at the moment. And if it does open up, there will be a rush on or a press on availability. So it's better to hold something now rather than to it opens up and you find that you can't get what you want. Let's move on to Asia. You mentioned Cambodia earlier on. Vietnam, there's a few questions about Vietnam.
Yeah, they're making sort of positive gestures, I think would be the way to put it. But still, certain sort of things need to be put in place to make sure that they are fully ready. I'm not talking about sort of measures or hygiene or anything like that. I'm talking about more sort of visas and the like. Again, there is domestic tourism definitely up and running in Vietnam. They make the valid point that they do have experience of handling these sorts of things, with SARS before. So I think Cambodia has led the way, and I don't think it'll be too long before Vietnam makes an announcement. I've learned not to sort of try and second guess anything with this pandemic, but I wouldn't be at all surprised to hear Vietnam sort of opening up again sort of from the 1st of August.
Staying in Asia, but more Central Asia, Robert's asking about the Silk Road and driving the Silk Road. But I think he's talking about next year. I think that given the number of borders you have to cross is probably not great for this summer. And then by late September, October, many of the sort of mountain passes are shutting. Would you agree that Silk Road is 21?
Yes, definitely. And I think the point you make there about crossing borders and multi-country itineraries, it's certainly something that you are not telling people not to do categorically, but where possible, we're urging people to just look at staying in one single country at the moment. And if possible, actually just narrowing that down to just staying in one particular region. I mean, we've always been big advocates of slow travel at Steps. There is a huge amount to be gained by identifying a property that just delivers for all of your needs, and staying in that one place and just really getting under the skin of that particular area, and exploring. And I think, you know, now is certainly the time to embrace that whole philosophy.
I think we'll just take two more questions. One somebody saying thank you for Jordan. What about Oman and Saudi Arabia? I was speaking with somebody today about Oman. It's not open yet, but given the news on Dubai, they feel that it will be imminently so, and they feel that it's a sparsely populated country, and again, small properties, etc. That it's something that will happen. Saudi Arabia, I'm not sure, and I'm not trying to throw you a hospital pass, JK, but do you know anything about Saudi?
Yes, I know we still have our tour set up for December, our group tour, which we're hoping to still to be able to operate. But again, yeah, we'll need to talk to our suppliers to ensure we can do that in a safe way. And obviously that will be reliant on the Saudis opening up to tourism, which currently they haven't. Yeah, we certainly will fully intend to run that trip in December, if we're able to.
A question from Carol Davis about, you mentioned South Africa, but what about the situation for getting to Victoria Falls? Zambia, as I understand it, is pretty much open. I'm not so sure about the Zimbabwean side.
Yeah, Zambia is open, but the Zimbabwean side isn't. There's a lot of tight screening with Zambia, but the tourist visa, I'm just reading something here about Zambia. It has been cancelled. So it's quite uncertain, really. It's basically saying, yes, we're open to visitors, but the tourist visa is at the moment temporarily cancelled. And we're finding there are quite a few ambiguities like that. You know, Justin asked about Vietnam earlier. You know, similar ambiguities there, that they're planning to open up for tourism, but hang about, guys, you're still not offering a tourist visa. So yeah, with regards to getting to Vic Falls at the moment, I would say postpone that for now. But we will be keeping a close eye on things, because yeah, Zambia is making lots of sort of positive noises.
I said we had time for two questions, but there's one more that's come in from Roy. Seeing it's from Roy, we'll definitely try and answer it. Saying that Steps may be flexible with deposits and cancellations. I doubt if airlines will be so flexible. Any comment regarding this, please? I'll try and answer it first. And I think that it's certainly our relationship with the airlines that we have and our contacts. They are pretty good, and they're certainly offering, well, we've been impressed with the amount of refunds that they've given and paid out, as opposed to a voucher. JK,
no, I think it's really valid point, Roy. But interesting, you know, I've been talking to my team quite a lot about this, and we've already started doing a little bit of training on flights, because whereas perhaps before we would just tend to offer you the best deal, what we're now looking at is, okay, what airlines are offering us the most flexible terms. And what I mean by that is that when you book your flights through a tour operator, unlike when you book them online, we can actually hold those seats for you without issuing the ticket. Now, often that comes at a cost, but in a situation like we have right now, there is real value in having that option available to us. So we can take a small deposit, hold the seats for you, and then we'll have a situation where we don't have to issue the tickets until, in some cases, a couple of weeks before departure. So the team at Steps are looking at this. Alison, who is an absolute wealth of knowledge on flights, who works for us, she's going to be doing more training with the team just to get them looking at the fare rules, so we can offer you tickets, offer you flights that have the maximum flexibility. Because often, if you pay a bit more, Roy, you'll get a ticket that is actually completely refundable in some cases. So it'll come down to just having to pay a little bit more just to give you that extra peace of mind, I think.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you so much for your, as ever, insight. Perhaps not as rambunctious as you normally are, but very thorough. So thank you for that. And thank you all for taking part and listening. Thank you for the questions that you fired through. If we haven't answered them, one of your questions, I apologize, I'm sorry. But please do give us a call tomorrow. The Skeleton team are here, ready to answer any questions that you might have. And again, any feedback that you have or any specific destinations that you want us to cover. As per this slide, we're on Wednesday, the 5th of August, we're going to talk on Africa. We're going to pick a couple of key destinations. So if there is one destination that we get a lot of requests for, then of course we'll put that one forward. But thank you very much for your time. Take care, stay safe, and have a very good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.